Hello, it is a cold, sleeting New York City evening. Why did I say New York City? New York evening. And, well, to warm myself up, I'm just sitting here with a book and one to read tonight. So, yes, I'm in my jammies, and yes, I'm in my bathrobe, and yes, I don't care. So, here's my disclaimer. This is Dolor and Shadow by Angela B. Chrysler. I am reading this. I am the author, I am the publisher, and I have full rights to do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and read chapter 19 tonight. Eric slept back the flap of Kallan's tent. The refreshing cold air struck his face, revitalizing his senses after sitting in the warm tent for so long. As he trudged through the camp, he replayed his conversation with Kallan and her refusal to keep the king alive. Too annoyed to join the festivities, he made his way to the small dark tent at the far end of camp, where Rune and Dagon sat exchanging anecdotes. "How did it go?" Dagon asked, glancing up from the meat he coddled. "It didn't," he grumbled. "Your turn." Dagon sighed, ending it with a swig of his drink. With nothing to say, he studied the nearest fire, surrounded by a gaggle of soldiers bent on boasting their deeds in battle. "How is she?" Rune asked. She wrapped her shawl tighter as Eric found himself a seat on the ground beside her. "Well, she's talking now," he said, resting an arm on his knee. He found the same group of soldiers who had broken off into random song, the mead doing so much to persuade their pitch. "Did you talk to her about the execution?" Gudrun asked. "I did." Eric didn't nod, but stared, happy to appease her inquisitiveness. Gudrun puffed out her bottom lip with impatience. A soldier fell over, sloshing his drink down his arm. "And?" "She's going to go through with it." The old woman didn't answer as she stared off at the farthest tree where the forest jabbed at the black of night. The soldiers had abandoned their song and moved on to downing more mead. "Will she at least see him?" Dagon asked, rolling the neck of the flask between his fingers. "I asked," Eric said. "She refused." "This isn't looking very hopeful," Gudrun said beneath her breath. "Has he eaten?" Eric asked with a nod, indicating the prisoner in the tent behind him. "He?" Dagon passed a calculative look toward the tent and shrugged. "He hasn't spoken or moved since we put him there 3 hours ago." A disquieting silence settled between the three of them as each stared off in their own direction. The soldiers began another verse, this one louder and with less pitch than the last. "She said nothing all day," Gudrun said. Eric and Dagon gazed at the woman hugging her legs. "She refuses victory, she refuses meals and sleep." Gudrun stared into the black of night above the trees. "She's regressing, and what's more, she's closed everyone out. No one can get close enough to pull her back." "What will you have us do?" Dagon asked, ready to receive his orders. Unfallen tears glazed the gold in Gudrun's eyes. "You are Eowl's oldest friend," she said. The name of their late king silenced the group as the source of Kallan's shadow surfaced. There was a belt of laughter from the cluster of soldiers, barely muted by the distance between them. "Speak to her," Gudrun said. "She'll listen to you." Dagon scoffed. "When has Kallan ever listened to anyone?" he said. "Not even Eowl could tame that child, you know that." On the other side of Gudrun, Eric silently watched the soldier. Dagon examined his flask as if lost in thoughts. Likely of hunting games and swordplay he longed to have again. He threw back his head, taking in a large mouthful of meat. Gudrun grinned. "Do you remember Kallan putting more effort in using the spells outside of class than the actual time spent in class?" "Until you taught her the cloaking spell," Eric said with an admiring grin. "Yes," Gudrun frowned, "which only made it harder to find her for the next lesson." "I told you not to teach her the advanced spells," Eric said with a twinkle in his eye. "She's too much of someone else I know." "I know what you're doing, hag." Dagon grimaced as the old woman who was content to ignore him. "It won't work." "And the little girl trading dresses for smiles in the warrens?" Gudrun said. "She was always fond of those damn warrens," Eric said. "Or sparring in her father's trousers and tunics all onside her father's warmen," Gudrun continued. Dagon gazed at the distant fire with a muted, pained look. She was forever running in and out of the streets of Lorlenalin in men's clothes and rags, rallying up the orphans she and Daly found there. "I've never seen anyone so eager to master the craft in swordplay," Gudrun said. She was 12, boasting battles not yet won, and of lands not yet conquered with a garish candor only Kallan could master, Eric said. "She stole my clothes," Dagon grumbled. "Twice Eowlf and I woke to find our garderobe bare. We had breakfast wrapped in blankets like a couple of wet nurses." "Bundles of fruit wrapped in gowns," Gudrun said. "Wasted on dreams, plans, and play," Eric said. "Until the day I watched her fervor and veracity break beneath the weight of Eowlf's corpse." Dagon's words put an end to their reflections, as Eric and Gudrun watched the captain throw his head back for a drink. A moment later, he shook his head. I will talk to her when we are home. Digging down the last of the meat and stood sighing. But expect no resolution, he said, and stumbled off in search of more drink. Inside the tent, the air was cold. The pair of soldiers sat staring down at Rune, who made no movement. The shackles that bound his wrists hadn't clinked for hours now. The Liasava king stared at the lantern, refusing to acknowledge his guard. Outside, the distant laughter rolled through the air. The low whispers of the high marshal, the captain, and the woman clung to the whistling wind, and Rune sat, listening to every word.